Okay, well, good evening, and thank you for coming out on this very warm evening. So this is going to serve as the work session for the Methacton School Board this month. So please rise for the pledge.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of an announcement, the board held an executive session immediately following last month's board meeting on June 25th. At the session, we discussed teacher negotiations, we discussed a staffing issue, and we discussed a student issue. The way we're going to run this evening's meeting is as follows. All business other than turf field has been tabled for this evening. So we're going to have a presentation by Dr. Miller. I just want to mention that the purpose of this meeting is for the board to get an update on the project from Dr. Miller and also to determine where we need to go from here. And I just want to mention that the board continues to be committed to this project. And after this update that we're going to get this evening, we'll be able to decide more intelligently exactly what the project is going to look like. So we felt that while the board was getting this update, that the public should be getting the update as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Miller to begin his presentation on the turf project.
Thank you. You all may want to move back to the second row here, or the first row, or wherever you can find a seat so that you're facing the screen rather than having to turn around. Did you hear back from Peace? Okay. Welcome. For those of you whose faces I don't recognize, and there aren't many, but whose faces I don't recognize, I'm Acting Superintendent Jeff Miller, also a former superintendent from some years back. Several discussions have been had over the years about the high school athletic fields and putting lights on them. I was involved in some of those when I was superintendent here. Those discussions have gone back quite a ways. I came into this current discussion somewhat late, so admittedly, part of this process of going through from beginning to end was to kind of get me up to speed as well. I suspect as of a week or two ago, all of you in this room knew more than I did about this project. That's no longer true. I now know quite a bit about this project, having spent a couple weeks really going through the process from beginning to end, all the way back actually to 2008. The most recent discussions started right about 2011, actually. There was a feasibility study done by EI Associates in 2008 as they were in the midst of a couple other construction projects for us, the Woodland renovation, the Skyview construction. EI Associates was doing that. They did a feasibility study. Not much was done with that feasibility study, as far as I can tell. Not much serious work was done with it. But in March of 2011, Hayes Large was asked to do a concept drawing. In effect, a concept drawing of a couple of turf fields for the high school campus. They did a concept drawing. The administrative staff did an analysis of that initial concept drawing. The cost of construction based on that initial concept from Hayes Large was a range of somewhere between approximately $3 million and $3.5 million. And you can see the things that are included. I'll read them to you because I know probably they're too small for you to read. New multi-purpose synthetic turf field inside the track in the main stadium, an all-weather running track surface at the D area, For those of you who don't know what a D area, this is what we call a D area. Looks like a D, okay, inside between the field and the track. New portable sound system, new scoreboard, multi-purpose synthetic turf field, grandstands, all at the second field. New field house with concession stands. Retaining wall and earthwork, which we'll talk about a little later again, but fencing, some bituminous walks, and again, synthetic turf at the second field. And then stormwater management and erosion and sedimentation control, but only associated with the new construction. And that's a topic that'll come up again later in the presentation. That's where we started. That's where Architerra started when they got into the project, and then that changed for us. And then they included a standard soft cost estimate for all of the additional costs that go into construction things for construction management and all those kind of oversight kind of things of 25%. That was back in March of 2011, and that's really when the serious discussions about this began. It's important to note in this original concept that a few important issues that showed up later in the process were not part of this initial concept, notably lights, and what you'll hear later on is campus-wide stormwater management. And we'll explain that a little bit later when we get to it. But those two things would have added a considerable amount to this estimate, probably $750,000 to $1 million. There were also no additional restrooms in this concept. A couple of toilets by the second field, but no real work on restrooms by the main field, the main stadium, which has always been a problem for us. In September of that year, 2011, the turf fields analysis report that the administration did was prepared by the administration, provided to the board. Again, Hazelard's concept drawings and cost opinion were included in that package. And this is just a general look at their design. You can see turf in the main field, new track which was not going to be, wasn't part of their estimate, but was intended to be done by others. And then a second turf field which shows up just below the tennis courts here. We'll talk about this a little later because there are some issues with this. This is one of them. As you can see, this is our property line, and this turf field is very close to that property line. In October of that year, 2011, the athletic director and some coaches present the Methacton High School Athletic Fields Improvement Project to the board. Took the Hazelarge estimates, the Hazelarge concept drawings, and some initial financing considerations, and presented them to the board. A lot of discussion at that meeting. The board, in effect, approved the Field Improvement and Lights Project, a Field Improvement and Lights Project, not knowing exactly what that project would look like yet, and authorized the administration to begin the selection process for an architect. Also at that meeting was discussion about some financing for this using the upper limit of that Hazelarge estimate of $3.5 million. The board tabled that. They did not decide to seek new money. And to date, no new money has been sought for this project. No new money has been approved. We are currently using funds in our capital fund to pay for the work that's been done, primarily by the design team and also the legal team. And we've spent, you'll see later, about $120,000 so far out of that fund. The initial financing proposal, when they talked about it, Dennis McCall talked about it, used a series of wraparounds and some debt restructuring to keep our current debt service level, although it would push it farther out, obviously, if you're borrowing $3.5 million. Anyway, the board decided to approve moving forward with a project, and in October and November, a request for proposals was put out for architects. Those were returned, they were reviewed, board and administration interviewed candidates, and on November 22nd of 2011, the board appointed Architerra as the project architect. In January, this is 2012 now, we've moved into 2012, Eric Fry was appointed as the project attorney for the project. And in February of that year, at the township's request, Eric submitted an application to Worcester. The application was for a text amendment to Worcester Township's zoning ordinance so that the township's ordinance would permit sports field lighting. Okay, that was presented to the township. Also in February, late February of that year, Architerra makes the first major public project presentation at a regular board meeting. That presentation included some aerial photographs of the campus, some regulatory issues, talking about things like setbacks, impervious surface coverage, definitions of those things, and some evidence of what was and is overuse of our current fields with some recommendations attached to that. And then also presented an overview of synthetic infill turf, which is the turf that is being proposed throughout all of the concepts that you'll see, and provided some initial core concepts for the board to look at. And we're going to look at a couple of those. I will warn you up front that the writing on them is way too small for you to read, and it's way too small for me to read. But we're going to talk about them in terms of overall costs rather than real specific costs. Concept A, Architerra was in the beginning working from the original Hayes Large concept diagrams. So they took the Hayes Large concepts and started with that to include some of the suggestions made by particularly the coaches. This concept had 2 fields, both lighted, additional parking in 2 places, and the original cost estimate was just under $3.5 million. It was like $3,499,000 and change. And as you can see, there's some additional parking here and some additional parking here. That's a restroom concession stand, that little thing there. Also moves some of the track and field issues outside of the stadium. Does some other work in the D areas, puts turf in the 1D of the stadium. That was core concept A, about $3.5 million. These all came at the same time here so that you could look at some different issues. Concept A1 took the same basic concept, a turf field here and a turf field up by the tennis courts, added some additional parking, as you can see, quite a bit of additional parking. The cost of this was estimated at $4.3 million. That parking and some track work added a good bit of money. This concept was later deemed unworkable because, as we were to find out later, the synthetic fields were going to be considered as impervious surface, meaning stormwater had to be carried away from them. Once that happened, then some other things began to happen too. Adding parking at that point became much more of a problem for us. So we moved to concept B. Concept B now moves the second turf field to an area north of the stadium. The other location, as I indicated, had setback problems. The corner of the turf field was very close to the property line. And this, for those of you who are familiar with the campus, this is a pretty hilly area over there. And putting that turf field in required a pretty substantial expense for retaining walls and compacted fill and all that. And that seemed to be a waste of funds that could be used elsewhere. So this concept kind of looked at moving the turf field over here. Cost of this concept was under $3.5 million, about $3,459,000. The problem with this, it was felt, and you can see this bump out for ball field there. Problem with this is it's very close to the road down there, and this was felt to be unworkable because lighting that field that close to the road was going to be problematic. Concept B1, same basic concept, but adds, again, the parking is there, adds some of this parking back in, and gives us a baseball field down in that area of the campus. Once it was clear that the turf fields would be considered impervious surface, this concept again was found to be unworkable just because of all the parking. And the estimate on this was over $5 million. It was about $5.2 million. just because of all the extra work. So concept C took B1 and changed it a little bit, added a grass multipurpose field in this area of it, and a natural grass stadium now. Takes the turf out of the stadium and just puts turf in here. You've got a turf baseball field and a softball field here. No additional parking. The estimated cost of this was $3,499,000. And we moved to a little bit of another iteration of concept C, concept C1. This puts the turf back in the stadium, the main stadium, and adds the parking back in. Once again, when you start doing that, you're adding considerable cost to the project. This added about $1.5 million to concept C. So the cost of this was now $4.9 million. So all of these concepts, kind of, I said to Dave earlier, every concept has something you can like about it, but when you start piecing together all of the things, the cost increases pretty dramatically. C2, multipurpose grass field, it's just a grass field now, takes concept P but includes a turf stadium and additional parking and some extra parking, and that comes in at about 5.2 as well. Again, changes this a little bit, but there's a lot of synthetic turf there and a lot of parking, a lot of blacktop. In March and April, 2 good neighbor meetings were held. Residents whose properties are proximate to the high school were invited to attend. The sessions included administration, members of the board, the architect, all of whom answered questions and provided the neighbors with information on the project, information particularly that was tailored to their unique concerns. The concerns primarily, and they have remained the same throughout the project, potential installation, utilization of lighted fields, security, traffic associated with extended hours of use of those fields, the potential for outside organization use of the new artificial turf and lights, and stormwater runoff management, both existing and potential after construction. Stormwater has always been a problem for us on this site. Just the way the site is built, everything runs downhill to one point at the bottom, and it's been a problem for years. In March and April, during this time, concepts D through G are developed by Architerra, each including a series of variations. I think we've, up to the end of this point, probably had about 15 or 16 different variations. Core concept D was designed to determine if a synthetic turf baseball facility could be built at the site of the current baseball facility, and if it could accommodate a maximum size soccer field. The soccer multi-use kind of fields are the biggest issue for the site, just because those are the fields that take the most pounding, and they're the fields that have the least opportunity to recover, and that the synthetic turf was designed to solve. And if we can't get enough of those multi-use fields, then that's not a good concept for us. The problem with this concept had some parking and had a turf field here, but the problem with this is a maximum size soccer field couldn't be fit in that space. E was able to put a maximum size soccer field down in this area, and this is an area that we'll soon kind of hone in on as the place for the second turf field. Got a maximum size soccer field and included 2 softball fields and additional parking. The cost of that was $4.3 million, and kind of looked at that and thought that maybe we were starting to get away from what we had really wanted to design this for, which was some multi-use fields that could be used a lot of different ways. And this one started to look like it was doing too many of the same things in the same season in the same place. Okay, so anyway, that was concept E. We moved to concept F, Same basic issue here, a turf field in that area. This one included a softball field and a baseball field. And for the first time, we are starting to see some stormwater management issues, because we are starting to realize or find out or be told that the entire campus is going to have to be managed in terms of stormwater. The estimated cost of this was $3.4 million. One of the problems here is, again, we're trying to design a field that's trying to do too many things in the same season: baseball, softball, lacrosse, just lots of things on the same field. F1 includes all the same items in F, but lights on the multi-purpose field, some track resurfacing, additional restrooms, some parking, which doesn't show up, but it's under that yellow arrow. And in order to replace one of the softball fields that was lost here, a grass softball field down in this area, where some of the stormwater management activities are going to take place. Concept G. This drawing was developed to determine if a natural grass softball field, again, trying to replace, we had 2 softball fields here that we're losing when this turf field goes in, trying to see if we could get one of those back in this area rather than the parking, which we now know is going to be a problem because of impervious surface. And the problem here is it doesn't fit. As you can see, left field, we're going to have to build one of Boston's green walls, big green monster there for home runs. It didn't fit. A full-size softball field didn't fit in there. On April 24th of that year, the board approved some additional surveying services from architect Zop Spector. Zop Spector is our engineer. They're asking to do a full topographical survey of the campus. We are now being told that the entire campus has to be stormwater managed. So in order to do that, Architera felt, and we agreed, that they need to do a full topographic study to make sure they could design that stormwater management properly. So that's approved. Also, Architera is working internally on some other concepts, H, I, and J. You're going to wonder why we jumped from G to K, and that's why this is in here. H, I, and J were internal concepts that they worked on. They were deemed to be unworkable for one reason or another, either because they had too much impervious surface, they were unaffordable, unworkable for some reason. So they were never shared with us. So our concepts that we've seen and worked with jumped from G to K. So when we come up with concept K, you don't wonder, well, what happened to H, I, and J? We didn't see them. On May 15th, 2012, the superintendent presented a project update to the board at a work session meeting, and during this presentation, concept K is displayed and recommended, and while the board does not take action on it, did indicate approval for the current field placement that you'll see in a minute, reserving the option, as they've always reserved the options, and we're going to talk about this a little later, to make changes by choosing among a lot of options when the project is bid. The project cost of this concept, core concept K, came in at $3,472,600. Did not include, at this point yet, the cost of campus-wide stormwater management. That will add about $315,000 to this concept. Later, that cost, 15 months later, 14 months later, climbs to about $328,000. So you're going to see the final cost estimate of stormwater management at about $328,000. But so if you add that, the cost of this, the estimated cost of this project right at this point was about $3.8 million. In June, the design team endorses core concept K, and K becomes a concept that we've worked with since then. Core concept K takes the turf field, the second turf field, puts it in this area, which is overlaid over where our current 2 softball fields are, and replaces those 2 softball fields over here so that we regain the 2 softball fields. We get a multi-use turf field. There's no additional parking here, but there is turf in the stadium, and some work in at least this part, this D of the stadium. There's a new javelin throw. There's, at some point, you're going to see a new pole vault area, some of that. Starting in October of that year, the superintendent met with John Harris, representative of the proximate neighbors, in a series of meetings, and a document comes out of those meetings. A document is prepared. It is presented to the board for discussion at their work session on October 16th. It's posted to the website. Feedback is invited. In November, the feedback that is obtained from the website and from the board and public comment is used to draft a revision, and that document is also posted to the website. Board chose at that time not to take action on that document. They have not ever taken action on that document, but that document is still on the website. In December of that year, based on suggestions from track and field people, some additional modifications are made to the track and the D area in Concept K. It results in an additional cost of $65,000. Second restroom facility is also planned as an add alternate, which would be not part of the base bid if we went out to bid, but as an addition if the board chose to add it. That $65,000 takes the total cost of this concept right now to about $3.8 million, $3,850,000, somewhere in that, approaching $3.9 million. In December of 2012, during a meeting of Worcester's Board of Supervisors, the advertisement of a Methacton lighting ordinance is approved, advertising the lighting ordinance. January and February, Worcester plans a public hearing on the proposed light ordinance. The hearing is held in January. It's continued to February. The ordinance is changed at that point to accommodate some feedback from both the public and from the Methacton administration. March and April, the ordinance is re-advertised for public comment, and Worcester approves a lighting ordinance on April 2nd of that year. Then in May and June, Core Concept K and the overall project undergo several revisions. They are revisions that could result in potential cost increases when the project is bid. Remember, we were at $3.8 million, $3.85, something like that. Additional stormwater management is now designed to correct the issues with the overall campus, and those costs, which were originally $315, as I said, are now estimated at $328.7. Lighting changes indicated by the township ordinance and as requested by the neighbors are made. Those changes increase the cost by $185,000. They include some additional poles to accommodate the lowering of the overall height of the poles from 100 feet to 85 feet. That resulted in some need for some additional poles. The multi-purpose field goes from 4 lights to 6 light poles, and the stadium field goes from 4 light poles to 5. In addition to that, there was some painting of light fixtures, painting with a special paint to absorb some light and reduce glare, and some impact to the switch gearing for those lights that would allow them to be lit at different candle powers. So let me get lost here. Okay. Just to give you a sense, once you add all, in case you're trying to add all those things up, I'll do that for you. The original Concept K was $3,472,000. We added $65,000 for some changes to the track, $328,000 for stormwater management, $185,000 for light changes. That brings Concept K at this point in May of June of this year to a little over $4 million, about $4,200,000. $4,050,000, and then some other changes in the costs. Remember, the $3.4 million that was developed for Concept K was developed about 15 months ago. That cost has climbed over that time by about 4 to 5%, just kind of inflationary cost increases. So we are just over $4 million for this. The cost of the stadium has moved from about $1.8 million to about just under $2 million, $1,999,000 and change. And the cost of the auxiliary field work has climbed from $1,233,000 to $1,005,000. On June 26th of that year, some additional services, architectural services, are approved for the stormwater management plan, and also the conditional use application is filed with the township. It's also anticipated that submittal to Montgomery County Conservation District will be filed, I believe, sometime this week, if I'm not mistaken. This is an aerial view of the current concept, or the concept as it currently exists. I can blow this up a little bit for you. Here's the softball field, grass softball with infield mix, a multi-purpose synthetic turf field that is available for several different sports. That is lit with an 8-foot fence around it. And then this is the main stadium, which has a new javelin area outside there, a track surface inside the D so that it is available for runners, new horizontal jump and pole vault area, one new restroom facility, and then this is a restroom facility that would be bid, this is the base bid, this one would be bid as an ad alternate if the board decided at some point when bids are out that they wanted more restroom facilities. That would be it. A new shot put area. And then this is the stormwater management area that's been designed north of the stadium that will, in effect, manage, along with the other stormwater management that we have in the rest of the site, will manage all of the stormwater from the site. To date, we have spent about $116,000 in architectural, engineering, permitting fees, escrow for the township's lighting expert. In addition to that, we spent about $4,300 in legal costs. So we have spent, as I said, about $120,000 out of the capital fund on this project. The estimated cost of the project, as it now stands, is estimated at this. Now, again, these are estimates. It is likely that that's not going to be the exact cost. It could be lower than that. Hopefully it wouldn't be higher than that when you bid it, but this is estimated. Miscellaneous, all of the miscellaneous things, and Dave can explain what some of those are, $83,000. The main stadium work, $1,999,800. The auxiliary field, the second synthetic field, $1,503,400. The two softball fields that are being moved, $659,800. For a subtotal of $4.246 million. That's really what we're looking at as the construction cost. There is then a 7% contingency built in for change orders and things like that of $297,000. Brings that total to $4.5 million. The ad alternate second restroom that I showed you back here is about $332,000. That's where we are. It is likely those estimates will continue to grow slightly as we move through the next several months. Just normal inflationary forces will do that. We are at a point, however, where we need to begin thinking about bid specifications, and we need to begin thinking about where we go from here and what comes next. From a process standpoint, Architerra needs to begin putting together bid specs around something. I believe those specifications should likely be around a large series of alternates. I think the way to bid this is almost just a menu of alternates that the board at some point can pick and choose from and jigsaw together the project you want, or the project that meets the number you want, however you want to look at it. But rather than do a lot of base bidding on this, it seems to me that the way to go is to do it as almost a smorgasbord of items that you can start piecing together. And we can talk about that at some point, but I would suspect there'll be quite a few of those. that's where we are. That's how we got here. As I said, partly this was for my own benefit to see what you've seen and what you went through to get us here. If you look at, in looking at these numbers over time, I mean, the original Hayes Large estimates were 3 to 3.5 million. The original concepts, most of them centered around, and we were trying, I believe, to center around keeping it under that 3.5 million target. If you take that 3 million for something and change, that was part of the original concept, and you include the changes that were required or made at your request, 65,000 for the track, 185,000 in lighting changes, 328,000 in stormwater management, you start coming pretty close to that 4 million, 4 million 2 figure. So, and that's, I guess, where I wanted to get myself. I wanted to find out, how did we get to that 4 million 2 figure? I understand the 7% contingency. I'm not always sure we should use contingencies. I think if you're careful about how you do things, you won't have a lot of change orders that need you to use those contingencies. But the base cost here is about 4.2 million, and it's not very out of line. It's about 4% over what you were looking at a year and a half ago almost. So that's where we are currently. What I'd like to do now is throw it open to the board to ask us questions, talk with each other about this, and then after you're all finished, we'll give the public a chance. Okay? Ready to come back up? I'm wondering what it would be appropriate to leave up here. That? I will. Okay, so I click. I will do that.
Okay, at this point, we're going to open up to the board a question period. If you have any questions for Dr. Miller, Mr. Horn, Mr. Bartle, Mr. Jacoby, now's the time to ask them. Do I have any questions?
I'm going through the numbers. Yeah. And I understand we have the 185, the 328, the 65. But nowhere else that I saw did we actually identify the number of dollars associated with redoing the softball fields. I mean, it has to be there, but I didn't see that in the original Hayes Large or any of those things.
Dave Horn from Architera. Hayes Large, in their report, from what I gather of it, did not have any money dedicated to anything on softball. Through the various 16 permutations we explored, Concept K, which is presented before you now, the current plan, due to where the second synthetic turf field we feel makes the most sense, it displaces 2 softballs, so we have to construct 2 new softball fields. That price tag for the softball is $659,800.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Oh,
And
I misunderstood.
no, I understand that. What I'm saying is, when we're trying to do the reconciliation from one to the other, that if you're starting off with $3.4 million of Hayes Large, you're starting off $659,000 short of what you'd wind up having to spend because you're just dislocating some fields.
Right.
Okay? So,
There's an offset of Hayes Large, for example, had considerable amount of retaining wall in their concept.
right on that upper field.
Yes.
Yeah.
There were other non-economic reasons for moving the synthetic turf field from the Hayes Large location. Some of it had to do with it just didn't fit without impinging very close to the property line, let alone the setbacks affiliated with that property line, and also the proximity to the neighboring residential areas. We thought it would be very difficult to gain approval for a synthetic field of that size at that location due to the residences in the area.
And I agree with that. I mean, there's no question that would have been difficult. It wasn't giving us the right size field. I think the concept that we've come up with here, I didn't do anything, that you guys came up with this and where things are placed is very good. I think it gets us what we want. It added some cost to it because we started displacing fields that we originally hadn't decided to do. We've also had $500,000 of extra cost because of stormwater and lights that we wouldn't have had to do, or we probably had some stormwater anyway, but I don't know that it would have come up to that. So, and the other aspect that Dr. Miller mentioned is that my understanding of this in the beginning was we wanted a total concept, okay? We wanted everything that it would be and what it would look like, and we wanted it segmented into sections that we could deal with so that if we wanted to unplug something, we could unplug it without somebody going away and say, well, wait a minute, that connects to this connects to that. We can't do that. Right. So the cost of it has gone up for reasons that you can understand, but the key to me is that we have it in sections that we can deal with so that we can implement something. We need the fields. We need the fields. I mean, it's ridiculous. I watch my granddaughter play lacrosse and field hockey on fields that is ridiculous. But we need to get this to the point where we can get it approved, you know? So I understand what you've done, but some of the cases are, particularly when it came to the softball fields, they were never part of the original concept.
Correct. And you know, I'll just add that even though we're on the verge of submitting drawings potentially to municipal authorities for beginning the permit or regulatory review process, we're really months away from putting this out to public bid. And although we are months away from putting it out to public bid, because you'd like to have your approval process nearly in place before you go out to bid, we have just begun to start to look at bid alternative options on how to fracture out various components of this larger menu of the overall project. And I'll give you just a few examples real quick. You know, we could reduce the amount of storm basin landscaping. That could result in a savings. I didn't say eliminate, I said reduce, maybe cut it in half, and still have an approvable, in the township's eyes, landscape stormwater management basin. But it also includes with those plants some phytoremediation in an effort to clean up some of the stormwater runoff from the adjacent bus parking area and things like that. But I mean, we can save $20,000 there. Eliminate one of the scoreboards that's proposed and the flagpoles. That's a savings, believe it or not, of $40,000. Now I'm starting on the low end and I'll get to some of the big ticket. But just in the last few days, we're looking at 7 options here of 7 potential deduct alternates that could save you $1.3 million. And so, I mean, we can get into various realms. It's going to be a function of the bidding. I'd like to have a few more deduct alternates and maybe even a couple of add alternates so that when we structure a package in 3 months from now or 4 months from now or whenever the timing's right per the review process, we go out to public bid, we'll have a consensus of what will be a base bid and then what will be our various menu items with our estimates for each one, so that if bids come in unexpectedly well, or unexpectedly high, we can adjust with these alternates. And it's not unique to this type of a project or to this school district. It's a strategy we often employ. It's just one that we're going to work on together over the next few months. But I'm confident we can come up with a significant amount, at least 1.3 million already, just very quickly, of potential deducts should the numbers start to come in high.
That's what I'm looking for. And I'm sure everybody else is looking
Turns
for it
anybody
too.
else's off.
So on that question on that list of 1.3 deducts, what, if any, of that is stuff that if we don't do now, we can't ever do?
Well, we want to get, the key is, we want the overall plan, the one that we're going to submit to county and township for approval, to be all comprehensive, so that we put it all out there to bid, not all necessarily in base bid, but in base bid in combination of add and deduct alternate bids, so that depending on the numbers, if we're over budget at any point in time and we have to eliminate some of the menu items on that plan, you still have approval to implement them a few years down the road. That's the key, getting the approval to do it, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. Unless it's, of course, a storm issue that, I mean, there's some things that are connected, but there are options, and those are the options that we're focusing on for alternate bidding.
One of the advantages of this kind of a project, because it's an outdoor sports field project, is there isn't a whole lot of things that if you didn't do them now, you could never do. Like building a building is a little bit different. There are certain things you've got to do, you've just got to do. With this, there are other things that if you take the right steps and prepare properly, you could do later. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. And there aren't a whole lot of things that are fatal if you don't do them now. Stormwater management being one of them. You've got to do that. But there are other things that you may have to take some steps in the bids, and we can even structure the bids in a way that takes some steps to do some infrastructure kind of things so that later on you could overlay on top. You can structure them that way.
Yeah, just make sure that we're not being penny wise and pound foolish, right?
Exactly.
Say, we'll cut out X, Y, and Z, and then you can never go back and do those again.
Yeah.
So it sounds like as long as you have the approvals, there's, any of the construction that we pull out could potentially be done down the road.
And if you bid them the right way.
Right.
And it's all in the design.
Right.
You're going to design it so that you have pluggable units. Like if you didn't put up lights, you would have the infrastructure to add the lights because you would run everything, you would have the bases, you would have all that stuff, you just may not have the lights or anything that even remotely associates itself with something like that.
Yeah, you put all the pull strings in and everything that you
So somebody better pay attention to the details.
Somebody is.
Somebody.
I want to address the fact, the reason that we started this in the beginning was because we found that we were deficient in the number of fields that we have. So we haven't seen H, I, and J. So K puts us to, well, those were internal, it said, right?
Right.
So K is putting us to where we will have the optimum number of fields that we need for.
No, I don't think any project's going to,
Well, where will it put us? How many fields will that put us?
we will
Increase us by?
we will gain a net of 4 fields with this scheme.
Okay, and this K, have we talked to the athletic department about this, our athletic director, to make sure this is optimum for what we need
Very
going
much so,
forward?
and
They've been
more than one
involved, Edie's
occasion.
been involved, Paul's been involved, all along the way.
Yeah, they give input
Yeah.
to track and field stuff.
Is that the design team that is being referred to in
Yes.
one of the slides here? So were they presented concepts H, I, and J, and they turned, or you just never even?
We didn't see them at all.
HI and-
Nobody saw them?
HI and J exists within the walls of Architerra, where we looked at a certain aspect to see if we turned something, would it make more sense, economic sense, functional sense, or if we added some, and we quickly dismissed it and didn't even waste time drawing it up and formally presenting it.
And just to go back a little bit to what Kathleen was saying, the reason we started this project and looked at the fields was for safety, period. And that's that's the reason that I voted for it, and I think that's the reason why the majority of the people voted for it. While we're doing the project, then of course, if we can increase the number of fields, and with the turf fields, was it 3.5 times a regular grass field that you get to use it? So-
Exactly.
So that would increase that as well.
You-
I'm concerned here that we've had this design, this core concept J, since June of 2012, and I don't know about any of you, but this is the first that I've seen of it.
Well, we've been dealing
This
with our,
concept K?
Yes,
Okay.
a year later.
Okay, well, now that we have K, that's where we are anyway. So if we have our
I've seen the thing that they showed here. I don't know that I remember it as concept K, but I remember seeing this design.
Concept K was endorsed by the, quote, "design team" on June 1, 2012, at a meeting that we wrote meeting minutes up for. It had school district designated members attending. And that was the meeting that basically concluded schematic design and moved us onto the next level of construction documents, design and permitting type drawings, and the refinement of K that's gone on for the last 13 or 14 months.
And I understand, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
understand that you don't select the people that get to hear this, you just come and present, and I do understand that.
Okay, well, back to my question. Now that we're going to have the K concept, and we've been talking about the fact that you can have the potential and deduct, those type of things. If that does come to fruition, if we get to the point where we are going to be adding and subtracting as we bid, are we going to make sure, we lived through construction before here with the building. I'm very concerned that when we do this again, I'd like to have the athletic director involved in what we take off the table and what we add to the table. Because ultimately, that's the department that tells us how to use these fields. So I mean, it's nice that we all are doing this, but I think that department needs to be very involved in what we add and subtract.
Well, and I agree, we absolutely need their input, but additionally, we have to look at the cost. We have to manage all of that as well. I mean, this is, I don't think this is a wish list, because I'm sure that if we made all your dreams come true, this would be more.
Yeah, this
So I
cost wouldn't
understand.
do it if you give them a wish list. But I will say, they have been involved all the way through. They will be involved the rest of the way through. I don't think that's a question. They'll be there. They won't make the final decision. They'll make some recommendations. You guys will look at the numbers and make the final decisions, because that's where it happens, but they'll be involved.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, at this time, we're going to move on to courtesy of the floor. And courtesy of the floor is going to take on a little change for this evening only. Usually, the purpose of courtesy of the floor is for the community members to come up and speak to the board so that we could hear what's on your mind, we could hear your comments. Ordinarily, courtesy of the floor does not allow questions. Tonight, we're going to have an exception whereby if you choose to ask a question, and a question is included in your comment, one of two things may happen. After you've taken your seat, if there's somebody here that thinks that they can answer the question and answer it quickly, and it's something that you need to know before you leave here tonight, then the question will be answered. If not, the question will be answered, the question will be posted, and the answer will be posted as well on our website. Can't give you a heads up, but it will be as quickly as possible. And so the meeting is taped. We'll get your question down precisely the way you ask it, and it'll be answered at that time. What we're also going to be doing for this meeting only is extending your time limit to speak to 3 minutes. However, that time limit will be strictly enforced, so we ask you to think about what you have to say and say it as quickly and as succinctly as you possibly can. Just one other thing, if everybody is standing up at the microphone and saying the same thing and the comments have become repetitive and redundant, then I will close the floor. So with that being said, do I have anybody with any comments this evening? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Bill Gray from Methacton United Soccer Club. First of all, the design looks great, I think. I have two questions. One, the football field drawing only showed field hockey and football lines, so I was curious if it's going to include lacrosse and soccer. There are twice as many lacrosse and soccer teams as field hockey teams, and the same thing goes for the softball fields. $650,000 seems like a lot to build softball fields that are grass, which on an already grass field, and there are only 2 softball teams also versus 8 multipurpose field teams.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will answer this in more detail on the website. I can only tell you that the final depiction of graphics on any given field will be determined just before it goes out to bid, and we're not there yet.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Ron Evans, Worcester Township. 20 years ago is when this started. And you're looking at the fellow that brought it up first, but this started out, all we wanted was football lights. That's all we wanted, lights on the field. Now we have 12 different options up there, which I think is sort of ridiculous. All right, there's certain things that, along with those football field, that you have to have: the runoff, other incidentals, lavatories. The incidentals like that, I can understand, but I can't understand why we have to get into baseball fields. The track, we can't hold a regular track meet because we don't have enough lanes. Evidently, we need to do that. But when this started out with football lights, period, the cost was way down. And now we're talking millions of dollars with 12 different options. And I can see coming down the road that no matter what happens, this is not ever, in my opinion, going to be approved. It's going to just keep mushrooming and bringing up questions. I have a couple things here. There are no schools in this area except Methacton that does not have lights. Doesn't that tell you something right there? One of the wealthiest districts in Montgomery County, and we're the only one that doesn't have football lights. I think that's sort of ridiculous. What motion's going to come up next after this one tonight? Water runoff, parking spaces, amount of use, lights out, time out, angle of the lights, trash pickup, policing of the grounds, or some other stupid suggestion from people that it doesn't really interfere with their private lifestyle. I don't generally make a habit of naming names, but I leave no choice. I just wish Mr. Harris would keep his nose out of this, because he's far enough away that it's not going to bother him anyway. But he has enough people and enough pull behind him to keep this thing. He told me a long time ago, you'll never get lights in this township. And I think that's ridiculous. He might run the school district, but he doesn't run me and the rest of these residents. I think it's high time we just get on with the football lights and let's go along with that. If there's certain things that you have to have, fine. You have to have stadiums. You have to have benches on both sides of the field. I understand that. You need additional parking. You need runoff and AstroTurf. But we don't need AstroTurf on 3 different fields. We just asked for it for one field, the football field,
Mr.
because they
Evans,
said it was a...
Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you for your
Okay.
comments. Thank you.
I'm almost finished. The football field was a safety hazard for football lights. And that's why playing football, they wanted to have the lights and the AstroTurf. And I was told a long time ago that the school board is in favor of both. Either get both of them or none. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. Why do we have fields? Sports and/or athletics. There is a difference. It's competition versus health. When I went to high school in a city with 5 public school choices. None of them had adjacent sports fields. For my choice, we went to a public park about 4 miles away for track, tennis, football, etc. Football is a fun sport to watch, but so were the gladiators, and we don't have gladiators anymore. So when Mrs. Barone cites safety as an issue with poorly maintained fields, why doesn't she go all the way and vote to ban football? About 200 colleges have stopped football as a sport in recent decades. I think that college choice is a more serious decision than many K-12 school choices. Yes, our fields still need improvement, starting with soil, irrigation, drainage, and proper care. I'm not sure about lights and do not favor artificial turf. And I think from day one it was recognized that the high school property was undersized relative to some of the expanses that have taken over farmlands near many towns in Pennsylvania. And I think that, for instance, with the present layout, above the place on the projection screen, possibly one of the softball fields could be in the immediate area above the words Kriebel Mill Road. Or alternately, some of the fields could be off campus. And that was the way it was when I went to high school, and I think there are other fields in the community that might be available. So I think trying to squeeze everything into the high school campus may be an unreasonable approach, where there are other fields that can be shared or utilized for athletics and sports. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Greg Pelicano. I'm president of Audubon Recreation Association. I just wanted to let the board know that in speaking to the 1,000-member families within our organization, we have overwhelming support for the design that has been talked about here tonight. I speak with families constantly about that. And the one thing I'll just add, too, is just being president of the organization for the last 5 years, we have seen a continued explosive growth of youth athletics in our baseball, softball, and basketball programs. I'm sure Bill Gray from the soccer club would say the same thing about soccer, as well as all the other sports organizations. So this is a continuing trend that we'll see more and more of, and I expect that you'll see even more desire to use these fields by the community groups going forward, because kids are starting at even a younger age, and I expect this to just continue over time. So thank you and appreciate it.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Yes, sir.
Rick DeLello, Worcester Township. First thing I want to do is I do want to thank the board for moving forward with this project. It's a little disappointing, frankly, that this design was in place 15 months ago, and this is the first opportunity potentially some of this board have seen, and certainly many in the audience, first time we're seeing, after obviously a lot of work went in to get to that design. It's disappointing that it took this long to get it out to the public in the middle of July. Perhaps not an ideal time, although that may have been scheduling the only time you could do it. I support the project fully. I have since this iteration's inception several years ago. I did see a slide about conditional use that we sort of went through really quickly. I was not clear whether you've made application to the township to that regard, and sort of, because that certainly sets a ball in motion, and you were mentioning not quite being ready with certain pieces of the documentation. And once you kind of get that ball rolling down the hill, There certainly was resistance with the lighting text amendment, and I would anticipate there will be some feedback at a conditional use hearing. Hate to see that get derailed simply because of process concern. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The conditional use application has been filed about 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Any additional comments this evening? Yes, sir.
Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. One question on the cost side, the $120,000 that was spent to date, is that included in the estimate of $4.2 to $4.5 million? So that's the cost from the point of groundbreaking to completion, the 4.2 to 4.5?
Yes, that's the
Okay.
construction, it's the estimated construction cost.
So it could be close to 4.6, 4.7?
Yes.
Okay. Just what, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning that the board was committed to this project. I mean, I noticed only 5 members of the board are here, so that's somewhat concerning. The fact that this was approved in October 2011, so just the gentleman just mentioned that this has been out there for a while. Also, interested to hear in where this project kind of ranks with everything else the board has to address. The teacher's contract that has expired, Shannondale tax appeal, various lawsuits that are out there, including the Van Horn lawsuit, superintendent search, and so forth. It just seems like there's a lot of things that are kind of piling up on you here. So that'd be good to know and give you some thought to that. As far as the project itself, the board should consider, with a project this size, it might be a good idea to have a project manager rather than Dr. Miller running the thing or somebody who has another job within the district. I think that would help a lot to control that 7% contingency in the cost estimates. There was no discussion of incremental revenues that could result, incremental annual maintenance or operating costs that might be incurred. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at, especially in light of last year's budget approval meeting. At the beginning of this, it was mentioned that the project could be financed with no additional tax dollars. I'd be interested in hearing if that was still the case. Because as you know, the budget for next year includes $1 million in financing savings already. So I don't know where that money's going to come from. And then lastly, Mr. Roth, in some of your campaign materials for the election, you mentioned that the cost should be shared among groups that can afford to fund the project. I don't know if you're talking about ARA, how much money you're looking for. I'd be interested to hear, maybe not tonight, but at some point, what your thoughts are on that. And that's it. Thank you.
What was that part again?
Well, in some of your campaign materials, it stated, and I'll quote, the burden of the cost of this very important project should be shared among the groups who can contribute financially to support the project.
What I was referring to is basically you've got a lot of groups out there in the community that would like to, to contribute to the project, either fundraising or something like that. And depending on all the different things that we do with the project, where you have different sized scoreboards or an extra restroom here or there or another concession stand put somewhere, that's what I was talking about. The basic project of the field, let's focus on the main things of those fields, okay? The safety concern is a major, major thing of mine. And when you start adding in all these other things, it just snowballs the cost. Adding the extra restroom facility is over $300,000, according to Dave Horn. So that type of thing is what I was referring to as far as sharing the burden of the cost, quote unquote. And that meant specifically going to other groups that may be wanting to formulate a fundraising campaign or whatever, however they want to do it. But the board is committed to the project, and it's just a matter of settling in on what we can, afford with the project and what we need to do.
Okay.
So, and as far as, you made a comment about the other board members not being here. I don't know why the other ones aren't here, but, I think this is a very important meeting, and I'm glad to see that this Concept K, and I too am the first one to see this concept. And I'm on the property committee, so that I haven't seen this out. But as you know, the past 6 to 8 months have not exactly been smooth ones for the district. Okay, so I think a lot of that had an effect on how this project has progressed. And touching on a couple other things, superintendent search, you bet the board's fully involved in that. You've got this project, you've got all the other things you mentioned. The answer is yes, everything is being worked on. So,
I understand that, but I just don't know where this one stacks up against everything else you've got. I mean, you've got limited time and resources.
Yeah,
I know
very, very true. So we got a lot of work to do.
Essentially volunteer basis, and I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. The board is committed to this, has been committed to this, if for nothing else other than for the safety reasons. We need more fields, and we need to enhance our fields. But the board looks at all of their responsibilities equally, and each of them get the time that they need. And frankly, it's just another day in a board member's life.
No, I understand that, and I support the project as well. I think it's something that's important.
Well, you brought
to
it
get
up,
done,
so I
and-
thought I'd respond.
No, that's fine. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Suzanne Andrews, Fairview Lane. We got a really good history of the design plan itself, but I don't think I heard exactly how it's going to be financed. I think I've forgotten the details. Is it coming from yearly taxes, or is it coming from a bond issue, or what?
There was some original talk about some wraparound bond issues and some debt restructuring that was not going to increase the tax at the time, but was going to push that debt service out farther. So, there's costs associated with that. That was quite some time ago. There hasn't been any talk recently about financing. There was an opportunity when we refunded some bonds 4 or 5 months ago to take out some new money. The board tabled that, so they have not talked about that. My guess is at some point there's going to be some borrowing necessary. This is not fundable out of the regular operating budget.
So essentially, it's still up in the air.
Yes.
And my math says that there's you've added $700,000 or so from the original concept plan to now. And how does that work out? Maybe you don't have that on the tip of your tongue either, but how does that work out in millage, additional millage, for instance? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Yes, sir?
Kyle Alba, Lower Providence. My only question is there an estimate on the maintenance of these fields, like per year or lifetime? Thank you.
Preliminarily, the rule of thumb for one synthetic turf field is annual maintenance costs, man hours, run the grooming machine, an occasional torn seam repair, things like that. Historically, the national average is about $1,200 a year in field total maintenance for one synthetic turf field. Comparatively, the maintenance on a natural grass athletic field typically runs anywhere, we've done about 70 school districts in this state. The lowest we've ever experienced on a one grass field annual maintenance cost was at the Kutztown School District, where it was just under $15,000 a year. The highest was Central Bucks West Stadium Field. When it was natural grass, they were spending just under $45,000 a year in maintenance.
Any other comments this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Sitting with Lois Byrne, so she had to leave early, and she wanted me to ask a question.
We need your name and your address.
My name is Jean Dickey, and I'm a resident of Lower Providence Township, and Lois Byrne is also a resident of Lower Providence Township. We both were looking at the map of Concept K, and we're looking at the lower left, if you're facing the map. Lois's question is this: it looks like there is a faint outline of a baseball field on the lower left, and I believe currently there is a grass soccer field on the left. Her question is, that rectangle on the left, is that the possibility of a grass soccer field for a future date above that baseball field? Or is that a tennis court? Is that a baseball field, and what is above it? That's the tennis courts? So the only soccer or lacrosse field is the turf field that we're looking at that's to the right of the softball fields. There's a field there. There's a field hockey field adjacent to the baseball field, and between the tennis court and the softball fields, there is a soccer field. Is that in the Concept K plan?
It exists as grass.
Right
Grass
now.
fields.
Right, and it's going to stay there.
Yes.
It's just not very visible on this plan right now.
This only shows the improvements.
The improvements. Okay, that's what's staying there.
It's dimmed because we focus in on the improvements.
Okay.
The others will remain.
That was her question, because she knows it's there, and she was just making sure it was staying there.
Yes.
Okay. In addition, I've been coming to all of these meetings since before the board approved to move forward with the turf field project. And I've attended every school board meeting, and I've had the unfortunate experience of attending every Worcester Township meeting, which is painful. I wanted to ask the question that our Methacton High School population has grown by, I believe it's about 400% since the high school was built back in the late 1960s. As I understand it, the athletic facilities, the outdoor facilities, have not really grown much since that time. So we're really, for the first time since the school's been built, looking at a total concept to improve and keep up with our population growth of our students. And this is something we really actually need to do. And I've had some people, or I've heard some people question, is this something we need to do? And my answer would be, well, what are you offering if we don't do it? We're already in putting this plan in place because we're of student safety. We are fortunate, I know, 3 minutes, but I started with Lois. Number one, we are fortunate that we are in one of the top high schools as far as the number of varsity sports that we offer, which is just wonderful. But we are also landlocked with what we have. So I would say, this is the first time we're moving forward. We absolutely have to do it. And if you aren't going to make this happen, what are you going to do in its place?
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Beam, Worcester. It was nearly 2 years ago, in October of 2011, when we had that meeting at Woodland, where there was a tremendous outpouring of support from the community, which the school board heard and the school board acted upon. And since that time, you as a board have been embarking on this process. And I want to commend you for what you've done, because it hasn't been easy. Not everyone has felt the same. This is a democracy. We have people who are entitled to and do express their opinions, and they're important because we are a community, both townships. It's important for all of us to be heard. But Joyce is absolutely right. Safety is paramount. There's nothing more important than the safety of our children, and this project is incredibly important to the district for that reason, and also for the opportunity that it gives the entire district in terms of pride, the increase of awareness of bringing up these facilities, allowing this district to be not the laughingstock, which it is in the eyes of many other districts, but to be Methacton. I mean, be Methacton and be a leader. Those of us who care about this community care about a lot more than just the athletic program, as does this board. We care about all aspects of this district. So this project, as we all know, is just one aspect of the entire spectrum of what's important here at Methacton. My question is this. So I just want to say thank you for what you've done, and I was interested in what you board members said, because I've been extremely interested, many others have been extremely interested in this, and quite frankly, this is the first time that we have seen anything about this, so I was interested that this is your situation as well. Here's my question. It's been quite some time since this began, and I know this is a complicated process, and it's not a TV show where it just goes from here to here and it's solved within an hour. But, and I know there are complications with the township, which will be dealt with, but can you give us an idea, at least to the best of your ability, about what you see as a realistic timeline going forward for this project? Because there are lots of parents who have children who are going to be juniors. Those who are going to be seniors are done. There's no hope for them. But if you're going to be a junior, you're going to be a sophomore, you're going to be a freshman. Some of these people out here are fortunate. They've got kids in elementary school. They should be in good shape, but that doesn't help everyone, every parent who's been interested in this. So an idea of the timeline would be helpful and appreciated. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Candy?
Candy Alaba, Eggville. I've heard a lot of people tonight talk about the safety of the fields, and the one thing that disturbs me is that these fields in the school district have been allowed to get in this shape for many years. I'm just concerned if the turf fields are going to be allowed to get in the same disrepair, because what we've seen so far over the years is really not a good example of maintenance. I mean, it's been mentioned in the past regarding the fields here at Arcola. After they built the addition here, they did not maintain or take care of the fields that they put in, and talked about maybe down the road turf fields here. I mean, this was mentioned a year or so ago. It was brought in. They built Arcola, they just went in and leveled at the fields and said the fields are in bad shape. They've complained about the maintenance of the fields for years. I think that falls on the shoulders of the school district, that they weren't forced to maintain the fields and keep them in good working shape. And I'm concerned that if we spend millions of dollars for these turf fields, are they going to be treated the same way as the grass was? I mean, this is an honest concern, considering you're asking for all the taxpayers to foot the bill for this. One way or another, you're going to be asking for us to do it. We're going to be in trouble if, for some miraculous reason, Harrisburg decides to do away with property taxes. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But these are things we have to look at, and these are concerns that need to be addressed. I mean, there is a lot of concerns. You need to pull in the whole community on this and find out the whole community's viewpoint. But this is a lot of money we're talking about, and I'm concerned it's going to be wasted if we can't maintain. And the way you're claiming they're going to be used, the all-purpose field is going to be multi-use, it's going to be used a lot. I don't know if just the football, is that just going to be for football games, or will other teams be playing on that? Okay, so they're going to be heavily used, so that's going to take money to keep them in tip-top shape. So, I mean, I know you said the average is $1,200 a year. How about in heavy usage?
Well, actually, one of the interesting things about the current technology of synthetic turf, as opposed to the synthetic turf of 1960s when AstroTurf first came out, it's evolved to a point where it's not use that wears out the field, it's ultraviolet rays that break down the polyethylene fiber.
It's wide open up there. There's no trees. I mean, the fields are in the direct sunlight, so
yeah,
that's what causes the most damage?
Yes, it does. Over time, it breaks down. That's why the fields will last, a synthetic turf surface will last anywhere from 8 to 15 years. The use, frankly, you want to use these fields as much as you can to get your value out of your construction dollar investment. Use does not wear out the fields. Maybe in a goal area, there's some very high use, high stress on that surface, and we can always cut out a patch and splice a new patch in if that's the case. But basically, the biggest culprit of wear and tear on the fields isn't the maintenance, although $1,200 a year of maintenance and occasional grooming sure helps. It's the UV degradation that occurs.
So I know the Phoenixville School District said it costs them about $2 million every 8 to 10 years to replace their fields. So, and they didn't say,
Well, I'll give you an example that I'm more familiar with. Upper Perkiomen School District. We were their consultant when they did 2 new turf fields, their stadium field and a field adjacent to their stadium. They put lights on that second field. There were already lights in the stadium. But with the turf fields, and they had a bigger need for fields. They had a deficit in fields on their campus that was more severe than yours currently is. But so they realized that 2 fields, they embarked on an aggressive program of seeing that those fields were used, number one, by school district needs, but then they developed a strategy for renting out the fields for community use needs. Now, it depends on the community, if the community's for that or not, but their school board actually gave the mandate to the athletic director that we want you to establish a lease out program so that when these fields are worn out, the surface, and needs to be replaced in 8, 10, 12, 15 years, the money from revenue received in renting out the field would pay for the replacement cost.
Sounds like a good idea.
And
Maybe
they're on
we need
track.
a really sound program, and renting sounds like the way to go.
Well, and I'll give that school district credit. They're on track. They're averaging about $50,000 of income a year that they're putting through rental, that they're putting exclusively to that. But the community's behind all that. So, I mean, it takes a synergy with a lot of groups to get behind that, including the township as well as the school district.
It sounds like a pretty good idea to keep in
Thank you,
mind.
Candy.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Yes, sir?
Hello, Jeff Burlett, Mill Road resident. Wanted to just comment that the design we're seeing tonight, I'm very pleased that we have the addition of the stormwater treatment. Hadn't seen that before. That's been a big concern of mine as a resident on the road. I don't know if everyone's aware, but even a moderate amount of rain causes massive flooding on the road. And there's also concerns about the well water that all the residents have in the area. So I think anything we could do to solve that problem, looks like it's being addressed here, would be fantastic. So hadn't seen that before. That's the reason why I came tonight, to make sure that was addressed, and we're on the way. A couple of other comments. I think in the final slide that showed the total cost, there was no line item for the stormwater conditions. I don't know why that was not in the PowerPoint briefing, and I'm not sure it was part of your sum, your total.
It was included in each of the auxiliary field cost, had a stormwater, a piece of that had stormwater stadium.
Okay.
It was incorporated into all 3 venues, softball, auxiliary field turf, and stadium field turf.
Okay,
But it's
fine.
there.
It's in there, yeah.
Great. And then the final question I have is, due to the limited amount of space we have on the property, and it's very apparent now once we put the new fields in, what is what's the consideration to moving the bus lot and using that for athletic fields or for any other purpose, since that's something that's very easy to move and probably be less costly than all the other sort of capital costs we're looking at today? So,
Okay. We'll
talk
answer
about
on
that
the
offline.
website.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? All right, before we adjourn, and Mr. Earnshaw, you reminded me, I didn't, for the record, state the attendance this evening. All board members are accounted for, with the exception of Jim Phillips, Maria Shackelford, Mark O'Neill, and Kim Woodring. Thank you all for coming out this evening. I hope that you learned a lot this evening. I know I did. Please know that we do listen to your comments, and we appreciate them. So thank you.
Joyce, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
First, thank you, everybody, for coming. I think this was invaluable. But my next question to everybody is, since we've had a delay in all these things and the district's had other things going on, what are we doing next? Where are we going next? I know we've handed in the ordinance. What can we do as board members? What can we do as a district? And what can we do as a community to get this moving forward?
It seems to me, and maybe Frank can weigh in this, the next process that we are waiting for, well, let me back up a little bit. Dave is beginning to start putting together at least the front material for bid specifications. We're going to start thinking about bid specifications. But the next major process to go through is the conditional use hearing at Worcester Township. We filed a conditional use application. We expect them to schedule a hearing for that.
That's right. They're required to schedule a hearing within 60 days of the date that we file. And I just checked my notes. The 26th of June is when the conditional use was filed. It may be the case that we've given them an extension of time with regard to that if there have been some things that have yet to be completed before we move forward to the hearing. But we should have a date in the relatively near future with regard to the conditional use hearing. At the same time, I noticed that our engineers are working on the land use plan, which is the subdivision land development plan. It's actually a land development plan. And that would be submitted probably sometime after whatever conditional use approval we get. It would be submitted sometime after that. So the project is moving forward in that regard, and all these other things can be moving simultaneously in the process at the same time. But the conditional use and then the land development approval are the two things that we're moving at now.
So that means
I think that conditional use hearing is the next critical step for us.
Okay. So that means as a district, we've done everything that we need to do on our end to make sure that all the proper things are done legally as well as
For now.
neighborhood-wise. Yeah. And now at this point, it's in the hands of waiting for the township to get back to us and approve?
I'm not sure exactly where that stands at this point, for what reason. I know that we gave them an extension of time. I'm not certain whether that was because of something that they needed to do, and I think it was. I think because the township had to retain an expert that they wanted to ask about the lighting situation. And I think that was the reason for the issue with regard to the extension. So yes, I believe we're in line to go to hearing, and I think we're ready to go to hearing, or we'll be ready to go when the hearing's called.
Then you'll keep us updated as to what they do when they come back to us, what we need to do, if residents need to appear, anything like that?
Yes, as well as the fact that the hearings are all public hearings, obviously, at the municipal building or someplace that they choose, and it's open to members of the public, certainly open to members of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, again, thank you for coming out tonight. Good night.